Ultra wide angle photography, I think, is one of the most challenging and rewarding forms of photography. But for beginning photographers, there are a couple of key sticking points that I think stop them from succeeding in wide angle photography. And I hope in this video, I'm going to cover both of those things and actually give you a start down the path of what I think is probably the most rewarding form of photography. Now, to start with, one of the big challenges is the price of the lenses. In the past, you were talking $1,000, $2,000 for a sharp ultra wide angle lens. That has certainly changed now with the advent of these very inexpensive, cheap Chinese-made manual focus lenses. And so I'm going to feature two of these lenses in this video. Both these lenses were sent out to me at some point by the manufacturers. They haven't had any say in the make of the video, and they don't even know that I'm making the video. But I'm featuring the 14mm f2.8 by Pergear and the TT Artisan 10mm f2. There are other similar lenses out there, but I've tested both of these. The image quality is great and the price is very good. And I will put links to both of these lenses in the description down below to the best prices I could find on the lenses. To start with, by having such a low price point, now we're in a position where you can buy one of these lenses, you can have a try at wide angle photography. And if you don't succeed, or if it takes you time, or in the end you decide you don't like it, you haven't outlaid $1,000, $2,000 just to try out a new form of photography. The other thing we've got is now that we have YouTube, we have access to all these different tutorials on all kinds of forms of photography, but particularly wide angle photography. You can just go and binge watch different tips and tricks to capturing better wide angle images. And I'm just going to take you through 5 tips that I've got that I think will kind of get you started on that path. And once you kind of master the tips that I've given you, then you can potentially look to more advanced like landscape photographers or interior real estate photographers, architecture photography. There's a bunch of guys out there that really specialize, but this is going to give you kind of a good base of understanding. Now, to start with, I think one of the misconceptions about wide angle lenses is that they are used for wide spaces. So people think, oh, I want to take a picture of a mountain is big and wide, I want to use a wide angle lens. Or I've got a broad, wide prairie, I want to use a wide angle lens. When actually the way that wide angle lenses work is they fit so much of the scene in that things off in the distance actually get pushed away. So if you're just taking a picture of a prairie or a mountain, those things are going to be very, very small in the scene. And there's certain artistic ways that you can use this where it pushes things away, where you've got a horizon and some interesting sky and sort of a plain, even foreground or something like that. But in general, we don't want to use wide angle lenses in wide spaces. Wide lenses are actually, or ultra wide lenses are actually designed to use in tight spaces or wraparound environments. And that is where you're in a situation where maybe you're in a forest or you're in a historic building or you're in a city and you've got this wraparound environment. And often what you'll find is you've just got this feeling being in this environment. You're seeing all this stuff around you and this is just magnificent. And then you pull out your camera and you take a photo and it just looks like nothing. And you just keep taking photos and photos and photos and looking at the back of the camera and you're like, this doesn't even remotely represent what I'm trying to capture here. An ultra wide angle lens is going to give you a wraparound image. This is going to make the viewer of your photo or video feel like they're there, feel like they are sucked into the scene, and it captures a field of view which is much more similar to what your eye is actually seeing, which is this huge wraparound environment. You will often hear people talk about a 50mm lens being the equivalent of what a human eye can see. And that is just when you look at a person in real life and then you look at a 50mm photo, the person in real life and the 50mm photo look very, very similar. But if we look at what our eye can see, I can see all the way over here. I can see all the way over here. This is not a 50mm field of view. This is an ultra wide angle field of view, which is the type of view that you're going to get out of ultra wide angle lenses like this. My next tip is to get close to things. And because of the way ultra wide angle lenses work, where they push everything away, when you're trying to take a picture of a person and you want them to be prominent in the scene, you need to get reasonably close to them. And I think beginning photographers, whether they've been shooting with a kit lens or 50mm or 35mm, are not going to be used to getting that close to their subject. So this is something you really have to think about. Get close enough to that subject if they are the main object or if they are the centerpiece or the focal point of that image, get close enough to them that they really are the focal point. So when somebody looks at them, they say, hey, that's where I'm looking. The other thing that you can do is you can get close to a person, and then if you've got a person like behind them, those two people in a 50mm photo might seem almost right next to each other. But with an ultra wide angle lens, you get this perspective distortion where you can make that person who's just a little bit closer to the lens more prominent, and they seem more like the subject, even though the other person is just barely standing behind them. So you really have this ability to draw a viewer's eye to the thing that is very close to the frame, and even things that are a little bit further behind kind of get pushed away. But in addition to that, it allows you to take a viewer on a journey where you kind of look at that closer thing, and then after you look at that closer thing or person, you look at the thing behind it. So ultra wide angle lenses get close to things closer than you're used to getting with your normal lenses. Now, the next tip is almost the opposite of the last one, which is maybe you want to get close but not too close. This is where we can talk about perspective distortion. There is a creative way we can use these lenses that makes for very interesting images, but when we're taking pictures of people, they won't necessarily be flattering images. So we have to be very mindful of the way an ultra-wide angle lens distorts the image. And that's because if we get very close to someone, like maybe their arms are in a photo or their feet or something, some body part of them is very close to the lens and another part of them is further away, you get this crazy, surreal, odd-looking image. Now, you can absolutely control this when you're doing your image composition. The question is, do I want this crazy, surreal-looking image, or am I trying to capture an image that looks more natural and like a normal picture of a person? So get close, but not too close, unless you are using perspective distortion in an artistic way, which you definitely can do with people or objects or scenes or all kinds of different ways that you can use perspective distortion to actually create some really interesting and compelling images. The other thing is to think about your foreground, because this ultra-wide angle lens pushes the things in the distance further away and it brings the thing closer to the camera, very, very close to the camera. And you can often use foreground elements to make for a more interesting image. And if you've got something on the ground or something in front of you that's interesting, you can just tip the camera forward, get some foreground elements, and the viewer's eye might actually be drawn to the foreground elements first and then to the main subject of the image, whether it be a person or a lighthouse or something like that. So you can give them this journey just by tilting the camera forward. The other thing you can do with foreground, particularly if you've got converging lines, like lines on a pavement or a road or tram tracks or something like that, you can get low to the ground and you can get these leading lines where these things come sort of right into the camera and they feel like they're coming right up to the viewer's face. So this is another way to use foreground elements. Get low and get these converging lines coming right into the camera. Another important thing to take into account when taking wide-angle photos is you're going to get so much of the scene in. So you might be in a situation where you've got sky, but then you've got very dark foreground in front of you. So it's very easy to blow out your highlights in this situation. And I'm happy to shoot these lenses just on automatic modes. Usually aperture priority is what I use, but I will use the exposure compensation to slightly underexpose the image to protect those highlights. So when I'm walking around, I don't really have to think too much about, am I blowing out my highlights? Because with a wide angle lens, you are going to get some really bright areas and some really dark areas. And if you blow out your highlights, you can't recover those in editing. They'll just be pure white. And that's probably one of the hallmarks of an amateur photographer or a photo that just doesn't look like it's been taken properly, is when you get completely blown out white highlights in a scene. So just underexpose your images a little bit, and then you can bring up those shadows and dark areas in editing, and that's just going to make for a much nicer image. I'll put links to the two lenses in the description down below, and I've just thrown a video on screen now. That's my dedicated video of the TT Artisan 10mm f2 lens. If you're on a crop sensor camera and you want to try ultra wide angle photography, that is absolutely the best lens to start with.